Woodstock was the gig of the century for the great and good of rock and roll, but who wasn't there, and why? Few bands have ever been as popular or as influential as Led Zeppelin. The foursome of singer Robert Plant, guitarist Jimmy Page, bassist John Paul Jones, and drummer John Bonham crafted the blueprint for hard rock with their thunderous blues-influenced riffs. The band cemented themselves in history with hits like Immigrant Song and Black Dog and the anthemic multi-part epic Stairway to Heaven. Tellingly, no fewer than 5 Led Zepp studio albums rank among the 100 top-selling LPs in American history. In other words, Led Zeppelin are one of the most singular and monolithic entities in rock history, which is precisely why they didn't play one of the most singular and monolithic outdoor festivals in rock history. Event planners approached the band's manager Peter Grant about a slot at Woodstock, and both the musicians and label execs were interested. Sadly, Grant decided to pass after worrying that Led Zeppelin would just have been another band on the bill. Instead, Plant and Company spent that historic mid-August weekend playing shows in New Jersey and Connecticut. Frank Zappa may have looked and acted like a hippie, but he was anything but. In fact, Zappa really didn't approve of the hippie generation's love of recreational drugs. He himself didn't do drugs, and he didn't allow members of his band, the Mothers of Invention, to do them. He even once recorded an anti-speed public service announcement. Nor did Zappa accept the ethos of the 60s counterculture. His band's 1968 song Who Needs the Peace Corps is a thorough indictment of hippies. It's not surprising, then, that Zappa rejected a plea from Woodstock organizers for the Mothers of Invention to play the festival, seeing as it was rife with both drugs and hippies. In the TV special Class of the 20th Century, Zappa remarked, "A lot of mud at Woodstock. We were invited, we turned it down." Of course, it didn't help that Zappa and his group had booked gigs elsewhere. They played a string of shows in Ottawa and Montreal on the weekend Woodstock took place.
Name? Jim. Occupation.
Perhaps no band exemplifies the sound of the late 60s more than The Doors. The group's many hits are widely regarded as psychedelic rock at its purest, helped along by Ray Manzarek's mind-bending keyboard work, Robbie Krieger's guitars, and the undeniable charisma of lead singer Jim Morrison. Fans never knew what the self-styled Lizard King was going to do next. Heck, he was arrested for his performances on more than one occasion. Altogether, that makes for a band that would have fit right in with the half-nude fans and drug-addled bands of Woodstock. Yet the Doors were not present at the 1969 festival. The group had already performed at the landmark Monterey Pop Festival in 1967, and thus passed on this new opportunity. During an online chat in 1996, Krieger said, "We never played at Woodstock because we were stupid and turned it down. We thought it would be a second-class repeat of Monterey Pop." Bob Dylan is a towering figure of 20th century American music. Labeled the voice of his generation, Dylan wrote Like a Rolling Stone, Blowing in the Wind, Mr. Tambourine Man, Just Like a Woman, and All Along the Watchtower, all before he turned 30. After emerging from the New York folk scene in the early 60s, Dylan had become a huge star by the middle of the decade. By 1969, however, he had largely disappeared from the music scene after recovering from a devastating motorcycle accident in '66 and experiencing a creative fallow period. In the summer of '69, the industry scuttlebutt was that Dylan was ready to make his comeback, and Woodstock organizers figured they had a shot at booking him. It wouldn't even have been much of a trip for Dylan. He lived in the artistic enclave of Woodstock, New York at the time, a mere 50-something miles away from the concert site. In the end, Dylan didn't play Woodstock. However,
here come the hippies, the advance guard of an invasion force expected to number between 1 and 200,000.
Dylan finally made his return to live music at another show just 2 weeks later, when he performed at the UK's Isle of Wight festival. The Rolling Stones may have predated the psychedelic era of 60s rock, but that didn't stop them from establishing themselves as one of the biggest acts of the decade. In the months leading up to the festival, the legendary British act had released their darkest and raunchiest singles to date, Sympathy for the Devil and Honky Tonk Women. The latter topped the Billboard Hot 100. Woodstock organizers naturally extended an invitation to the Stones to perform, but Mick Jagger turned it down on everyone's behalf. It made logistical sense. Jagger was unable to perform as he was in Australia shooting the movie Ned Kelly at the time. Guitarist Keith Richards, meanwhile, was preoccupied with the birth of his first child, who arrived just 5 days before the festival began. In at least 2 respects, Procol Harum weren't like most other rock bands of the Woodstock era. Firstly, an organ figures prominently into the group's fancy Baroque sound, especially on their first single and biggest ever hit, 1967's A Whiter Shade of Pale. Secondly, Keith Reid enjoyed the full benefits of a band member despite not playing an instrument. He served as Procol Harum's chief lyricist, crafting the words sung by lead singer Gary Brooker. The group, who only formed in 1967, made such a big splash so quickly that they briefly entertained an offer from Woodstock organizers to play the massive festival. In a 1998 interview, Brooker said, "They really wanted us at Woodstock, they pleaded with us, but we were just coming to the end of a long tour, and one of the reasons we were going back to England was that the wife of guitarist Robin Trower was going to have a baby. And so Procol Harum returned to the UK. Trower's baby, by the way, arrived 2 weeks late, so the band could have played Woodstock after all. As Brooker lamented, It would have helped us a lot if we had been at Woodstock, but that's the way the dice fall. In the summer of '69, Jethro Tull released their second album, another collection of the group's signature combination of blues, jazz, and progressive rock. The band's frontman, Ian Anderson, is counted among the strangest of the decade, given how he dressed like a wizard, hopped on one foot, and rocked the flute on stage.
Like a lot of things, it's, square pegs in round holes are just there to be defied and beaten into shape.
Anderson was also apparently one of the few stars of the 60s and 70s who was no fan of chaos or debauchery. Anderson later told Songfacts that when his manager proposed Jethro Tull playing Woodstock, he asked what other bands were set to perform. Anderson remembered, and he listed a large number of groups who were reputedly going to play, and that it was going to be a hippie festival, and I said, will there be lots of naked ladies, and will there be taking drugs and drinking lots of beers and fooling around in the mud? Manager Terry Ellis prophetically confirmed that yes, all of those things were definite possibilities, which is why Anderson said no. Anderson added, I don't like hippies, and I'm usually rather put off by naked ladies unless the time is right. The British art prog rock band the Moody Blues are best known for Nights in White Satin, their breakthrough single off the 1967 concept album Days of Future Past. The song was a smash hit in the UK, but took until 1972 to reach number 2 on the American pop chart. It's possible that the Moody Blues would have struck gold stateside a little sooner, however, if they had followed through on their plans to play Woodstock in the summer of '69. Speaking about their decision to turn down the festival, the group's singer, Justin Hayward, later told On Milwaukee, sometimes I wonder if that was a good decision or not. I'm pretty sure we're listed on some of the posters and advertising. At that point, the Moody Blues were much more popular and established in Europe than they were in the US, and so they opted to stick to France and the UK during the Woodstock dates. They played in Paris that weekend before returning to Britain for the Isle of Wight festival. Like Jimmy Page and Eric Clapton, Beck was a member of the Yardbirds in the mid-1960s before he left to form the Jeff Beck Group with Ron Wood and Rod Stewart. The group toured extensively around the US in the late 60s, with their final road trip taking them through the East Coast. Stewart wrote in his memoir that the final scheduled stop before the band flew home in 1969 was some outdoor event or other in upstate New York in August. That festival, of course, was Woodstock, but the Jeff Beck Group wouldn't wind up playing it after all. Just before their set at Woodstock, the band stayed in a hotel outside JFK Airport in New York City, with plans to head up north to play the show, head back to NYC, and fly to London all in one night. But the group pulled out because Beck abandoned them. Stewart wrote, Jeff had already flown out on an earlier flight. Apparently, he had got wind from somewhere of a rumor, which turned out to be false, that his missus was having an affair with the gardener, so he was quite keen to go home.
Let me put it this way.
Go ahead.
He wasn't a good band leader.
Singer-songwriter Joni Mitchell was responsible for a number of classic folk rock songs that helped define the 60s and 70s, from Both Sides Now to River to Big Yellow Taxi. She also wrote Woodstock, the first and most famous tune about the rock festival, and a song that helped make the weekend legendary in the minds of millions. Oddly enough, the woman who wrote such an evocative and mood-capturing song as Woodstock didn't actually perform at the Woodstock Music and Art Fair. She didn't even go. But guess who covered Woodstock and made it a top 20 hit? Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, an act that did play the festival. Graham, Nash, and Mitchell were a couple at the time, and Mitchell herself was scheduled to hit Woodstock too. But then came the reports of the first problem-plagued day of the festival. Mitchell, fearing she'd get stranded in upstate New York and be unable to tape an episode of the Dick Cavett Show the following Monday, opted to not make the trip. As it turns out, she'd been a little overcautious. When she went on Cavett, both David Crosby and Stephen Stills made it back in time to appear too. Chicago, the band, not the city, enjoyed many distinct periods with various different sounds. In the 80s, they were a slick soft rock band who made radio ballads like You're the Inspiration and Hard to Say I'm Sorry. In the 70s, they were a jazz-tinged, rollicking ensemble who recorded classic rock staples such as 25 or 624 and Saturday in the Park. And when Chicago began in the 60s, they were a progressive jazz fusion rock band who released their debut album in 1969 under the name Chicago Transit Authority. That album scored Chicago a Grammy Award nomination for Best New Artist. The experimental, forward-thinking group no doubt had the musical chops to play an event like Woodstock. Naturally, then, they were booked to play the festival. However, the band had previously signed a contract with Bill Graham to play the legendary Fillmore West in San Francisco. And Graham could schedule the dates for any time he liked. So he booked Chicago to play in August 1969, the same weekend as Woodstock. That left a slot open at Woodstock, which was quickly filled by Santana, a group who, funnily enough, were managed by Graham. Chicago singer Peter Cetera later told the Spokesman Review, "We were sort of peeved at him for pulling that one." What was supposed to be 3 days of love and music went a little beyond that due to numerous technical and weather delays. That meant that Jimi Hendrix, who had been contractually promised to close Woodstock Festival, didn't perform until the extremely un-rock-and-roll time of 9 a.m. on Monday morning. He turned out one of Woodstock's most memorable moments, delivering a free-form, feedback-laden version of the Star-Spangled Banner to a mostly empty farm. But if festival organizers had their way, Woodstock would have had a more wholesome ending. As the festival's executive producer Michael Lang said at a speaking event in 2009, "We all grew up with Roy Rogers." Lang and his associates really wanted to finish Woodstock with a 57-year-old singing cowboy crooning his signature song Happy Trails. So what went wrong? Lang simply said, "Roy Rogers turned me down."